Rubbing her arms in a futile attempt to ward off the wintry chill, Nabooru strode down one of Hyrule Castle's dull and lifeless corridors. How could the Heliad stand living in this place? It was freezing! Every part of her that was not covered by her ridiculous, and not to mention itchy, Helian attire was frozen in this miserable cold. A night in the desert could be freezing, but at least you were inside most of the time, and you knew it would be warm once the sun climbed over the horizon. Here, not even dawn brought the promise of warmth, not in winter. The wind swept in from the frigid snow-peak ranges in the north, with little to break its fury between here and those mountains. The weather could be worse. At least it's not a sandstorm, Nabooru supposed. That usually meant getting stuck indoors for hours with her moody husband. Hopefully, he wouldn't be so sour today. She knew better than to think that would be the case. It was never the case anymore. That damned mask of his had taken up most of the man's time. Given the letter of Vale had sent her this morning, Nabooru wasn't hopeful about the idea of cheering him up. Cheering Ganondorf up? Nabooru scoffed. That was not going to happen. Maybe Vale's idea of taking him fishing wasn't so bad. No, she'd already decided that was a positively stupid idea. Her thoughts about somehow getting on her husband's good side, if there was such a thing anymore, vanished as she rounded the corner. She halted at the door to Ganondorf's rooms and nodded to the two Gerudo guards who greeted her. They both wore the white livery of the king's personal guard and were amongst the most trusted soldiers in Ganondorf's retinue. As paranoid as always, Nabooru thought. Not that she could blame the man. He had his reasons. He's not in a good mood, one of the guards informed her casually as Nabooru rose a hand to knock on the door. Why am I not surprised? Nabooru said with an exasperated sigh. Do you know what's wrong this time? No idea, but he's been talking in there a bit. He sounds mighty angry, the guard said, her brow creased in concern as she added, He's in there alone. Is he not well? That damned mask, Nabooru thought irritably. Ganondorf had probably been talking to it again. I'll talk to him, she said with a reassuring smile. It was probably just Kome and Kotake come to pay him a visit. You know how secretive those two can be. Of course, the woman did not sound reassured. Nabooru hated those two witches. It was difficult not to say their names without letting her dislike of them betray her. They had too much say in Ganondorf's decisions, and he rarely questioned them. Abandoning her thoughts of the two hags, Nabooru knocked on the door and waited until a gruff voice bid her enter. Supposedly set aside for guests of the royal household, the room was hardly inviting, which said a lot about Hylian hospitality. A fire crackled within the black stone hearth, but the room was still bitterly cold. No tapestries bedecked the walls as one would expect, letting the cold seep through the frigid stone. None of that chilled her as much as the man who stood staring into the fireplace, his back to her. It was hard to believe that she had once seen him differently. Her heart, her beloved. Beloved. Was he still that? No. So much had changed recently. Nabooru pushed aside the thoughts and emotions that tugged at her, focusing her attention on the man garbed in his long black robes that nearly touched the floor. He was dark-skinned, as all Gerudo were, and his red hair was neatly combed. Nabooru was not surprised to see he was holding a mask in his hand, regarding it as if it were a thing of delicate beauty. Shaped in the likeness of a human skull with its lower jawbone missing, Nabooru thought the thing was hideous. Ganondorf? She greeted him cautiously, trying to gauge his mood. He was brooding, again. What news of the boy? She asked, trying to spark some sort of conversation. Your messenger told me you knew where he was. The boy lives, Ganondorf growled. He is more resilient than I expected. My ravens say he is in Lon Lon Ranch, not far from here. His eyes still lingered on the mask, and he still didn't look up. Annoyed, Nabooru almost bit her lip. How is it possible he survived? She asked. 3 wolfos could take down far easier prey. The word sickened Nabooru. She disliked the idea of killing a child, especially by such barbaric means. It was over a month since the attack, and since then the boy had vanished. Nabooru had presumed him dead, as had Ganondorf. It seems he got lucky, Ganondorf muttered. How has he managed to stay hidden all this time? He is protected by the Sheikah. They must have convinced the owners of the ranch to keep him. And the stone? Nabooru asked. Still with him, Ganondorf said. It is? She might have tried a feeble joke about kids losing things, but Ganondorf's words caught her by such surprise that she quickly forgot that idea. She kept her thoughts focused on the emerald. Why hadn't the Sheikah taken it for safekeeping? It was unlikely they would bring such a valuable artifact to the capital. Ganondorf's spies were aplenty there, and he could easily snatch it. Nor could they take it far beyond Hyrule's borders, which would slowly erode the seal the stone protected. Unless, had they left it with the boy because that was exactly what Ganondorf thought they wouldn't do? Had Ganondorf been looking for a Sheikah the whole time when his quarry was still in the hands of this child? Ganondorf was dangerously quiet. Nabooru could sense the rage simmering just beneath his exterior. Had he already found out about Avail's message? Great. She hated it when he was like this. Once she might have been able to calm him down easily, but that was no easy task these days. Ganondorf strode purposefully to the table that stood between two chairs. They were close to the fireplace to give the room's occupant and their guests some comfort. Setting the mask on the table, Ganondorf removed a piece of parchment from his pocket. Nabooru stared at it as he looked at the parchment and then up at her. Well, damn. Nabooru recognized the handwriting. It belonged to Avail. Nabooru was fairly certain she knew the letter's contents without looking at the parchment. It was the report she'd been hoping Ganondorf hadn't received yet. A report on a raid that neither Avail nor Nabooru had authorized. What I want to know, Ganondorf growled, is why the Bulblin searching for the boy attacked Orden. Did you have anything to do with this? You know I am far more cautious than that, Ganondorf, she said, almost admonishingly. Avail tells me the Blinn thought the boy was there. She did not give the order, and nor would she. Why was I not informed of this? Ganondorf demanded, eyes flashing with anger. Whose plan was it to attack Hyrule's outlying villages? Who gave the order? Fort Farron is less than a day's ride away, and I would not rouse the suspicion of its lord. Not yet. Tell me then, who ordered this foray? The Bulblin King, Nabooru answered calmly. I only found out about the raid this morning. If I had known anything, I would have informed you. You know that. Ganondorf studied her, no doubt trying to discern the truth of her words. The damned fool, he finally muttered with disgust. I will deal with him and have him replaced by somebody more competent. More competent? That would be difficult. The Bulblins were an uncivilized lot, heralding from a kingdom beyond the Gerudo Desert. After years of war with neighboring kingdoms, only a fraction of their territory remained. Some called their land the Moblin Kingdom and saw it as one of the 10 kingdoms. Other folk argued that it was far too uncivilized to be called the 10th Kingdom. We were all uncivilized once, Nabooru thought. They will overcome it in time. There is one other thing, Ganondorf said presently. Lady Impa knows about the stone. She ordered one of her kin to protect the boy and has been keeping an eye on me ever since. We will have to collect the other stones soon. We will need to act before Lady Impa has a chance to interfere. I might have convinced King Nohansen and the council that we were not involved in the recent Blinn raids, but she is another matter. A shame that killing her would only cause more problems than it would solve. Ganondorf placed his hands on the table. His eyes strayed to the mask briefly before he focused his attention on a scroll beside Avail's report. Now that we know where the emerald is, we must act quickly before the Sheikah move it. Which they will. What would you have me do? Nabooru asked. Privately, she hoped he wasn't going to ask her to go and demand the Zora hand over their spiritual stone. The river folk hadn't been too happy last time, and their king. No self-respecting sloth would have been as slow as the Zora monarch. Have one of your women steal the stone. Ganondorf's voice broke Nabooru out of her thoughts quicker than she'd slipped into them. On second thought, watching the Zora monarch move seemed like a good idea. Raiding a village protected by some of the last surviving Sheikah, that was not likely to end well. Besides, the Gerudo only stole from the rich, not farmers or children. The ranch and the village are still guarded, Nabooru pointed out. They won't be seen, Ganondorf said. You seem rather certain, Nabooru said, daring to sound amused. Ganondorf scowled as he held out his hand to reveal 2 white stones with a black weeping eye etched onto their surface. A Sheikah portal stone. Nabooru didn't bother asking how he'd come to have them in his possession. They were probably stolen. Sheikah portal stones were rare, and those that remained were carefully guarded. Not guarded well enough, Nabooru thought dryly. Ordinarily, Ganondorf explained as he plucked one of the stones from his palm. These require the user to cast a spell at the location they want to warp to. The spell can also be placed on an object. How long does the spell last? Nabooru asked. 3 days, Ganondorf answered. Kome and Kotake intend to make one of the ranch hands take the pendant when they stop at Kakariko. One of them, Kome is quite certain, visits his relatives there when he has errands in the town. Once the pendant is back at the ranch, getting in is a simple matter. Nabooru already had someone in mind, but something else bothered her. What if they are seen? They use the second portal stone and escape. Ganondorf handed her the stones. Whoever you choose, have them meet Kome and Kotake and Kakariko in 2 days. And Lady Impa? I'll deal with her if she tries to interfere. It was probably not a good idea to ask what he had in mind. There is one other thing. Ganondorf's words halted Nabooru's thoughts of leaving. Have you located the king's half-brother? No, Nabooru answered, keeping her voice level. There has been no trace of him. He can't have just vanished, Ganondorf said angrily. I want him found. Bastard or not, he is a loose end I intend to deal with. King Nohansen's half-brother, disguised as a lord of some distant holding, had vanished just after the Gerudo's arrival. It wasn't the first time he disappeared. It was believed that, during the waning years of the 100-Year War, he'd fled the court as a boy and was raised as a priest among the Order of Sages. They were a small sect devoted to the worship of the first sages. King Nohansen had eventually welcomed his half-brother back, never acknowledging that they were in fact related. Since his disappearance, the Gerudo had tracked down the sage worshippers, but their efforts had yielded no trace of the man they sought. We will keep searching. I am certain that he cannot hide from us for long, Nabooru offered. Perhaps the cold was getting to her, but she felt extremely uncomfortable. Is that all? Ganondorf nodded and went back to his brooding by the fire. Nabooru left the room and let out a relieved breath that she had been holding. Is he alright? The guard she'd spoken to earlier asked. Fine, Nabooru said, her voice slightly more pitched than normal. Our king is in good health. You need not fear for him. She offered the guards a reassuring nod and then took off down the corridor. As she walked towards the palace grounds, hoping to get some fresh air, she became wrapped in her thoughts. There was something wrong with that skull mask. Despite appearing icy, Ganondorf had always cared about the Gerudo. He would never have risked his people in a foolish endeavor that could spark a war. That mask had done something to him. She couldn't allow him to bring the wrath of the 10 Kingdoms upon the Gerudo's heads just for some personal vendetta. There has to be something I can— Crash! Not paying attention to where she was going, Nabooru walked straight into a servant and knocked him to the ground. Watch where you're going! Nabooru snapped as the young lad picked himself up. With one frightened look at the Gerudo, he scurried off. Nabooru smirked. She found it amusing how much fear the Gerudo managed to instill in the Hylians. They probably believed the old Hylian myth that the Gerudo offered their male populace to the gods after they sired a child. Nabooru snorted. Many tales offered their own suggestions on why there were so few Gerudo men, and many of them were ridiculous. In reality, the truth was just as dark as some of those tales. Nabooru set off, deciding that she would somehow find out more about Ganondorf's mask without him knowing what she was up to.
6 long weeks had passed since Link's near-fatal encounter with the Wolfos. After losing so much blood and fighting the illness brought on by the bites of the rabid beasts, his recovery had been a slow process. The first week had been the worst. He'd lost most of his strength, and when he first saw his scrawny appearance in the mirror, he'd been shocked. Still, he was determined to get his strength back. Despite Capra's reassurance that the emerald was safe, Link still needed to find Zelda. How long would it be until he lured the desert man to Lon Lon? He had tried sneaking out several times, but was barely able to make it to the gate before fatigue overcame him. As winter set in, and Link's health slowly returned to him, he kept himself busy by helping Malon with chores around the ranch. At first, he only spent an hour or two helping with menial chores that involved looking after the animals, but as the days progressed, he could manage working for longer hours. Link was pleased when Navi decided he was well enough to begin practicing swordplay. He tried recalling everything Ferenz had taught him, and when he was lucky, one of the younger farmhands would spar with him. In the evenings, once all the day's work was done, Navi continued teaching him Hylian. Malon attempted to help, but she kept finding his mistakes hilarious, at least until Navi got annoyed. She hadn't found his inability to count rupees funny. To the young and inexperienced mind, the concept of 1 rupee having a value of 5 gems was confusing. Yet, in all this, Link longed for the forest. He wondered how Saria and the other Kokiri were faring. He knew he couldn't go back, not only because the Sheikah protecting the stone couldn't enter the Lost Woods for long, or so Navi told him, but also because he would be endangering the others by returning. With each passing day, the longing turned to a dull ache, and Link's restless mind wandered amidst memories of tall trees, nights around a campfire, and playing with the other Kokiri. He yearned for the woods to the point he often felt sick. It was like seeing one's home across a treacherous chasm, with no way of crossing the cavernous abyss. At other times, Link wondered if he would be welcomed back, even if it weren't for the dangerous sorcerer hunting him, and it was safe to return. He hadn't exactly left in the best of circumstances. Late one evening, when Link quietly slipped out to the stables, the stable hands found him curled up and fast asleep, snugly tucked in a nest of hay. A young and curious filly had gone to sleep beside him. Link woke the next morning to find himself tucked snugly in a thick blanket. After that, sleeping in the stables became something of a habit. Talon and the stable hands tried to convince him that he could share the loft with them, but Link insisted on remaining where he was. They left him with one of Talon's younger hounds, who decided to sleep on top of him, whereupon it promptly drooled on Link's cheek. When Link forced the hound back on the straw, the pup didn't seem to catch the hint, and promptly laid back on top of him. This went on and on for some time, until finally the hound relented and slept beside him. After 6 long weeks, it was nearly time to journey to Hyrule Castle. A part of Link was relieved, but he was also afraid of what else he'd find within the vast expanse of Hyrule Field. 2 nights before his departure, as evening descended on Hyrule, he sat in a bath of steaming warm water. Its warmth soaked through him, soothing the pain from his injuries both old and new. He could have stayed there for a lot longer, except the water was beginning to cool, and Navi would probably wonder what he was doing if he didn't hurry up. So he finished washing, dried himself off, and dressed. He ran a hand along the 5 red scars that marred his cheek, stopping within inches of his eye. The broad size of the bite marks on his injured arm and leg were a reminder of just how ghastly the wounds had been. Just staring at them in the small hand mirror sent a chill down his spine. His thoughts erring ever closer to the horrible snarls of the Wolfos and its teeth ripping into his flesh, hot blood pulsing from the wounds. A loud shout interrupted his thoughts. "Link!" Navi called. "Hurry up in there! Dinner's almost ready! What is taking you so long?" "I'm coming, Navi!" Link called back distractedly. He was silently grateful for Navi intruding on his thoughts, settling his mind onto the fact that he was famished. He placed the mirror back on the stand and left the bathroom. Navi was waiting just outside the door. "About time? What were you doing?" she teased, following him up the hallway. Practicing your swimming or something? Was not, Link answered with mild annoyance. Navi seemed to notice something was distracting him, judging by her pained expression. You want to talk about it? She asked quietly. No, Link answered. Not right now. Besides, I'm hungry. You're always hungry, Navi muttered in Kokiri. She interchanged between Kokiri and Hylian much more adeptly than Link. He frequently relied on her to repeat what he said in Hylian, or interpret what anyone else said into Kokiri. Navi followed him to the kitchen, where they found Malon and Talon already seated at the table. They ate alone. Malon's mother had passed away several winters ago during an ill-fated journey to the Gerudo Valley. Link wanted to ask what had happened to her, but wanting to upset Malon, he didn't. When Talon placed a large bowl of stew in front of Link, he sat down, taking in the aroma of the spicy peppers. It smelled delicious. Forgetting his manners yet again, Link grabbed the bowl with both hands and began to slurp down its contents down rather noisily. It only occurred to him that this was not very polite when Navi flew up to his ear and coughed sharply. Link glanced up, saw Navi jerk her head towards Talon, and then caught the two farmers staring at him. Yum. Thank you, he said appreciatively, before remembering he wasn't supposed to be eating this way. Oh. He promptly apologized and put the bowl down. Well, Talon cleared his throat. It's clearly nice to know you enjoyed it, lad, but you'd best mind your manners around some folk. I will, Link promised, earning a raised eyebrow from Navi. When both lawns were occupied with their meal, and Link helped himself to a second serving, Navi whispered in his ear, You better hope the princess is not fussy about formalities, or we'll be lucky to get anywhere near her. Link was too busy wolfing down his stew to reply, promptly burping as he finished. Malon giggled, and Navi shot him a disgusted look. Pardon, Link managed, trying not to grin and failing miserably. You'll get the hang of it, Talon said, sounding torn between exasperation and amusement. Would you like some more? Malon asked, offering the soup ladle to Link. Talon cleared his throat again. I think that's enough. I don't want you getting sick on us. Seeing that they were all finished, he leaned forward in his chair. You two best be off to bed shortly. But first, he eyed both Link and Navi. I thought you should know that Sierra has arranged for you to stay in Castletown for a while. And since Malon and I are headed there, I thought you might like to come with us. I'd like that, Link said, happy to discover that he'd be in friendly company rather than following a creepy-eyed Sheikah. At the thought of leaving the ranch and the simple sanctuary it provided, a sense of gloom had settled over Link, but at Talon's suggestion, it quickly vanished. I thought you might, Talon said with a small chuckle. We'll stop at Kakariko on the way for the night. Seeming to guess Link's next question, he added, It's bad luck to travel the plains at night. Don't worry, we'll be in Castletown before you know it. Could you take me all the way into Hyrule Castle? Link asked, not quite able to quell the nervous knot tightening around his gut. Talon eyed him seriously. I'm afraid not, lad. Until recently, people could present their petitions to the king or queen at an appointed time. People from all over Hyrule would come, and it was a tremendous occasion. Talon's eyes fell on Malon. Your grandfather used to tell me stories of people lining the road before the castle, performers and vendors flocking the avenue. Unfortunately, it's not like that anymore. Missing most of what Talon was saying, Link asked inquisitively, But Malon's uncle, Uncle Bellin, he's the stable master at the castle, isn't he? That he is, Talon affirmed quietly. But that doesn't mean I can just go wandering into the palace anytime I feel like it. Not nowadays. If he was in need of a stable hand, well, that might be different. I'd like to see him, Malin chimed in, seemingly oblivious to Link's concern. You will, Talon promised. He stood up, pushing his chair back. Come on, it's time for bed. We've got a lot to do in the morning. Link voiced no objection and made his way into the hallway, yawning loudly. Malin followed behind him, and they headed up the stairs to their rooms. Try though he did, Link couldn't get to sleep, not between his worry at his impending departure and the never-ending ache of homesickness. After trying to sleep in his room, as Navi thought it might be warmer, Link decided to head downstairs. The house seemed quiet, save for Talon's usual snoring. Still mindful of waking anyone up, Link carefully opened the front door and stepped out into the chill winter air. The moon had long since set, and Navi was his only source of light. As he crossed the path, across to the stables, a hoot made Link look up. Capra was watching from the wall. He often did at night if it was cloudy or there was no moon. His unblinking eyes followed Link to the stables, like a sentry keeping guard. It's not like I'm trying to sneak out, Link mumbled. He'd thought about that a couple of times when Malin had gone to town on errands. He even succeeded in sneaking out the gate once without Navi noticing, just to have a peek. Seeing the guards at the town gate, one of them scowling at him with their red eyes, Link had decided to try again another time. Besides, he wasn't eager to be too far from the town's walls. Not on his own. When Navi found out, she hadn't been in the slightest bit amused. Both she and Capra seemed to think that Ganondorf's spies were around every corner. He couldn't have that many, could he? Link thought. Then again, Ganondorf had tracked him down easily enough before. The thought sent an icy shiver running down his back, and he tried to remind himself that he was safe. Ganondorf couldn't find him here. Link walked into the stable and quietly shut the door behind him. Talon's 2 hounds snoozed away in one corner of the stable, stirring enough to see that he wasn't an intruder, and then promptly fell asleep again. When he reached the final stall, Epona nudged him for a food. He attempted to ignore the filly, but she only persisted in nudging him again. So, with Navi's help, he retrieved a handful of oats and offered them to her. Epona sniffed his offering, snorted in apparent disgust, and then proceeded to eat them anyway. That done, Link lay down on the pallet of straw he'd fashioned for himself, pulling his itchy blanket around him. Eventually, Epona came to lie down beside him. She was very warm, and it wasn't long before both horse and boy were fast asleep. Link awoke to something tickling his ear. "Navi, stop it!" he groaned, rolling over into the straw. "It's not me," Navi said from afar. Someone shushed her and then giggled. "Try again, sleepyhead." "Hello, Malin," Link replied groggily. "Is it time to get up yet?" That tickling returned. Link opened his eyes to see what it was, and saw her brushing a feather against his ear. "You're harder to wake up than Dad," she teased, grinning. She leaned closer, looking at his tunic in sudden consternation. "Is that cuckoo poop on your tunic?" "What?" Link jumped up with a yelp, brushing his tunic before Malin burst out laughing. "Tricked you!" "Not funny," Link retorted, grabbing a fistful of hay and throwing it at her in retaliation. This only made Malin laugh harder. "Hey, if you two want breakfast, you ought to hurry up," Navi told them, and they quickly stopped. "It isn't going to stay warm forever, you know." "Come on. Da left enough for both of us," Malin said, brushing hay off her dress. She was promptly distracted by Epona nosing her shoulder. "Stop that, Epona. I'll come back and feed you. And you too." There was more than one horse peering over its stall, looking expectantly at her. It was still early, the sun's golden glow only just peeking over the horizon, and a heavy frost clung to the ground. As always, working began early on a farm, so Link wasn't surprised to see several of the farmhands standing near the gate, their voices carrying clearly in the cold, crisp breeze. Link followed Malon back to the house to find 2 steaming bowls of porridge waiting for them, with a gentle swirl of honey on top. Link could even taste a hint of cinnamon as he swallowed the first mouthful. Malon watched him, looking like she wanted to say something, but then turned her attention to her own meal. They finished their breakfast quickly, and then once the table was cleared, they made a start on the day's chores. Amongst the morning's tasks, Malon and Link tended to the horses. Today, they were trying to get Epona to take to her halter, and it wasn't the first time they'd tried. Every effort had ended in the young animal biting, kicking, or just running away. Ingo had even tried, albeit rather reluctantly. That was before Epona kicked him, leaving him to howl with rage, hopping up and down on one foot and spewing a string of profanities. "Yeah, that's really going to calm the animal down," Navi had muttered sarcastically. Link had accidentally volunteered himself for the exercise, after he'd discovered that the Kokiri Emerald could calm down most animals when it was close by. It was now in Link's satchel, which he always kept on him. Malon also seemed to think they could try playing his ocarina, but as Link wasn't very good at playing it without sounding like a symphony of angry cats, he didn't like his chances. "Right," Link said quietly to himself as he approached the filly, halter in one hand, hoping to grab her head and neck in the secure grip Malon had shown him. Epona's gaze was fixed on him, or more specifically, the halter in his hand. She didn't twitch. "Stay still," Link said quietly, still edging closer to Epona. He tried a soothing voice Saria might have used. "Good girl. That's it. Just stay still, or I'm never giving you treats again. 3 more steps. 2 more. Almost there." Epona's ears twitched, and then, just when Link thought he had her, she burst into motion, her ears back, head snapping away from him. "Oh no, you!" Link tried to wrap his hand around her neck, tripped over a stone as she took flight, and then went face first into the grass. The scent of earth, grass, and horse manure filled his nose. Wait, horse manure? A quick look confirmed his suspicion. He just landed face first in horse manure. "Ah!" he cried, jumping up faster than if Epona had kicked him. "Stupid horse." "You know, I think Malon's suggestion might be worth trying," Navi offered, coming to his side. "Just a thought." Getting to his feet and ignoring Navi, Link cast an angry glare at Epona. "Are you okay, fairy boy?" Malon asked, approaching him from the fence. "Oh, yuck!" She wrinkled her nose at the sight of the horse dung on Link's face, but thankfully she didn't laugh. "Why don't you try playing your ocarina for her? You said that might calm her down." Link probably shouldn't have told her Saria's instrument possessed earth magic. He hadn't explained the concept very well, but he knew that if done properly, it could calm Epona down. On the other hand, Link didn't like to think that Epona might trample him if he played badly. Or perhaps one of the other horses would. "Come on," Malon encouraged him. "Why don't you play her song? You know, the one I showed you." "My playing might scare her," Link told her, reluctant to show Malon his woeful ocarina skills. "Just give it a try. I've heard you play, and you're not that bad. Please." She gave him a pleading look. Link could hardly refuse when Malon went puppy-eyed. "Fine," he said. He had often heard Malon singing the melody quietly to herself in her room, and she'd been happy to teach him how to play it. "It's from a music box. An instrument my mother gave me. I think it's Shiken," Malon had explained. "But it doesn't work anymore. I still remember the song, though." To start with, it did not go well. Screech! At the horrible discordant shriek of Link's first attempt, Epona looked ready to find somewhere to hide, and even Malon cringed. Thankfully, none of the horses made a move to run him over, which Link took to be a good sign. "Keep trying," Malon said, managing a small smile that almost looked like a grimace. "Just don't blow so hard. Epona settled as Link's playing quickly improved and she finally trotted over to him. Link obligingly gave her a scratch on the muzzle, and the filly rolled her eyes lazily. With the horse distracted, Malon offered Link the halter, and they finally managed to slip it on. This time, nobody was kicked or bitten, and Link didn't end up face first in horse droppings. Finally, he thought, feeling pleased with himself. I forgive you. This time, he said, scratching her muzzle. Link and Malon weren't given long to bask in their achievement of finally getting Epona to behave. The steady trot of a horse's hooves and Ingo's bellowing voice quickly ruined the moment. What are you two doing? Ingo barked, leaping off his horse, which seemed none too pleased by his outburst. Ingo eyed the ocarina in Link's hand. Are you two children fooling around again? He asked harshly. Malon, find your father for me. I need a word with him. Once you're done, I want my horse cleaned up. He's had a long, hard ride from Kakariko. I'll take him, Link offered, eyeing the stallion, sweat coursing its gray hide. At least the horse was a great deal more pleasant than its owner. Ingo scowled but then relented. Fine. He thrust the reins to Link. Be quick, boy. Hopefully you'll remember what Malon showed you. That means I don't want to find my gear discarded in a giant heap. Link nodded. Yes, Ingo. Good. That also means I don't want to find you've used a horse trough to wash that muck off. He eyed the droppings still caked to Link's cheek and clothes. Or I'll make sure you scrub it clean without Malon helping you this time. Got it? Link nodded, suppressing a strong desire to scowl. That would just make Ingo madder, which he didn't want. Well, get on with it then. With that, Ingo stormed off. I was hoping he'd be longer in Kakariko, Malon said, almost mournfully. She thrust the reins of Ingo's mount. Thank you for taking him, Link. Will you two be okay while I find Da? Yeah, Link assured her. With that, he led the way out of the corral. Malon ended up spending the rest of the day helping her father, which left Link to tend to Ingo's horse, clean its gear, and then see to other horses. By the time he was done, his limbs were weary, he stunk, and his feet hurt. He'd tried using a drinking barrel to wash himself off and was promptly told off by Navi, who made him clean out the small barrel and refill it. By the day's end, and with little to distract him save his aching bones, Link's anxiety rose. How was he going to see Zelda? Would they really be safe on the road? Malon and Navi both noticed he was rather quiet at dinner, but nobody pestered him about it, probably assuming he was just tired. Link went to sleep in the stables, his sword and shield against one wall. Most of his gear was beside him while the Kokiri Emerald, his only reminder of home apart from Saria's ocarina, remained where he always kept it. He stroked Epona as she lay down with her head draped over him, letting him know he was forgiven for putting a halter on her. I'll miss you, he told the young horse. The filly just snorted in response. Malon and your Da said I could come back any time I want, and I'll give you lots of treats. Epona's lips buzzed in apparent approval, and then she nuzzled him, letting Link gently stroke her. He would miss the ranch. In the short space of 6 weeks, it had almost become a second home to him. Now, once again, he was leaving it behind. Link didn't remember falling asleep. When he did, he awoke with a start, breaking away from his dreams of the day he'd left the forest. There had been something else too, a voice trying to warn him. Wake up, child. The wolves of the desert approach. They come. Wake up. He'd heard that voice before, seeming to come from the Kokiri Emerald itself. It had been that sound which stirred him from his sleep, awakening him to a world shrouded in darkness. Link blinked and clutched at his surroundings, struggling to orient himself. Heart beating madly, he reminded himself that he was in the stables of Lon Lon Ranch. He just needed to give his eyes a moment to adjust to the gloom. He glanced at the nearby shutter, which offered him a view into a moonless sky. As Link looked, a silhouette passed over the stars, blotting them out as it moved. What was that? Link wondered. His imagination ran wild, conjuring up images of monsters that roamed the night, none of which helped alleviate Link's fears. Before he could dwell too much on this, the dark shape appeared again, looming larger this time as it circled around the stable. The hairs on the back of Link's neck stood on end as he thought he heard a door creaking on its hinges. That sounded like the front door of the house. Nobody would be coming or going at this time of night. A thief? If there was a thief, he needed to warn the others, starting with Navi. Link could make out Navi's faint light glowing in his green cap on a shelf near Epona's stall. He hissed her name, and then a loud screech from an owl made him jump. He turned to see the large bird sitting on a windowsill. "Capera?" Link whispered, scrambling to his feet. The owl hooted in response. When he did, the chickens woke up, saw the large owl, and began squawking in fright. Probably thought he was contemplating a midnight snack. "Link," Capera hooted. "They are coming." "What? Who's coming?" Link asked, confused. "The ones who seek the stone." Link's jaw dropped. "But how?" he gasped, his voice pitching with growling terror. "There's no time to explain. You have to leave now," he said. "They will kill you if they see you. I'll get help." The hounds started whining then, barking madly as they scratched at the door of the stables. "Link? Capera? What is going on?" came Navi's groggy voice as she extracted herself from Link's hat. "Thieves," Capera replied. "Inside." Navi's eyes bulged in alarm. Link was frozen, unsure of what to do. He couldn't leave without helping Malon and Talon. The thieves were only here because of him. Reaching his decision, Link jumped off the straw bed and grabbed his shield and sword. "Link!" Navi hissed. "What are you doing?" "You said they're in my house," Link said. "I won't let Malon or Talon get hurt." Navi looked aghast at the idea. Capera didn't approve either. "A noble but stupid sentiment, Link," the owl said. "The thief is a Gerudo. You are no match for her. I will get help from the village. I believe the farmhands are still there. You have to come with me, and I can get you to safety." Link could already see a flaw with that idea. "How are you going to get help? You can't go into the village," Link pointed out. He had to go now. They were wasting too much time. He turned on his heels and ran for the door. "Link!" Navi screamed. He reached the door and tore the latch undone. At this, the two hounds barked and raced to the door, spooking several horses and further alarming the chickens who were stuck in one of the back stalls. The noise was bound to get someone's attention, even if the thief didn't. Link slipped through the door, and in his haste, he accidentally tripped over the barrow he'd left against the wall, knocking it sideways and into the door. The impact knocked the door shut, trapping the dogs inside. They bayed loudly, but Link ignored them, hobbling toward the farmhouse as fast as he could, pain pulsing through his foot. Link tried to ignore the relentless throbbing as he ran towards the house. "Link, stop!" Capera swooped towards him, but wasn't fast enough. He almost crashed into the house as Link reached the door, which was already open, and slipped inside. He thought he saw a dark shape disappear from the top landing upstairs and tiptoed after them. "Link, listen to me and get back outside," Navi whispered urgently as she zipped inside. "They're upstairs," Link whispered. "Which is a good reason why we should go and get help," Navi hissed. "Link, for Din's sake, do as you're told!" Link wasn't listening. The thief was probably headed to his room, provided they even knew where that was. They might pick the wrong room, which would put either Malin or Talon in danger. Or both. He wondered if the thief had any way of knowing he never let the gem out of his sight. Without further thought, he dashed to the stairs and tiptoed up them. At the landing, he could vaguely make out a figure standing at Malin's door. They had one hand on the door handle and were illuminated only by Navi. She was trying to tug on Link's collar, as if that alone would be enough to drag him back down the stairs and out of harm's way. She realized her error, but by then, it was too late. The intruder by Malin's door had noticed them. The woman's olive skin marked her as a Gerudo, and Link just had time to notice the red veil across her face before her eyes narrowed. There wasn't even time to blink. A blur of moment and a flash of metal was Link's only warning, and then... "Get down!" Navi screamed. There was a loud thunk, and Link's heart leapt into his throat. A knife quivered in the wall beside him, the tip firmly lodged in the wood. The Gerudo had missed, probably hoping he'd get scared and run. Realizing he wasn't going to flee, the woman raced forward, drawing a curved blade. She was fast, and by the time Link had his sword ready, she was almost on him. Her blade was a blur of steel, and only instinct saved him from being cleaved in two. The impact of the Gerudo's sword against his own sent Link staggering into the wall. Jumping towards him, the Gerudo grabbed him by the scruff of the neck with one hand, and snatched his sword arm with the other. She twisted his wrist, just shy of breaking bones. Link cried out, part terror, part pain. "Drop it!" the Gerudo hissed. Unable to break free of her grip, and afraid she'd break his arm, Link did so. The Gerudo rewarded him by shoving him hard in the back, knocking him to the floor. Link's cheek slapped painfully against the wood. Before he could consider moving, the Gerudo turned him over into his back. Without any care of causing injury, she snatched a fistful of hair and hauled him to his feet. Link bit back a scream, the Gerudo's grip tearing hair from his scalp. That was when Link felt her blade biting the skin of his throat, only dimly aware that he was trembling. With a shriek, Navi flew to his aid, but it was a futile thing. With a casual flick of her hand, the Gerudo slapped her. She went crashing into the wall, emitting a frail squeak of pain and slipping to the floor. Link cried out in dismay, but the Gerudo only held him more firmly. "Give me the Kokiri Emerald, and I will let you go," she whispered harshly. "I don't know what you're talking about," Link said, his voice shrill with terror. "Don't lie, Kit. Link, is that you?" came a sleepy voice from down the hall. Malin stepped out of her room, sounding tired and confused, but otherwise unaware of the danger she was in. "What's going on?" "Turn back," Link thought. "It's nothing. Go back." Link desperately wanted to say something, but the Gerudo placed a hand over his mouth, her blade biting even harder against his throat. Then Malin saw the scene in front of her and her eyes widened. The veiled woman looked up too, just as Malin let out a blood-curdling scream that outdid the howls of even the most determined hound. The Gerudo let go of Link, sending him stumbling into the wall, and then ran towards Malin. Malin's scream ended in a whimper as the Gerudo grabbed her by the wrist. She struggled briefly but was unable to do much before she was shoved tightly against her attacker's chest, the scimitar just inches from her throat. Link got to his feet, snatching up his sword, and then saw that the Gerudo already had her captor. His breath caught in his throat. Malin whimpered. "No, please don't hurt me." Malin's captor gazed down at her, inspecting her with an oddly calculating look. "How odd. Unless I am very much mistaken, you have Gerudo blood. Only faint, but it's definitely there." She made a noise of disgust. "Who was your mother, that she disgraced herself by claiming a Hylian as her beloved? Was it her, or another that spoiled her bloodline. Malon made a sound like a muffled sob. Link didn't move. While he was unsure what the Gerudo was saying, he did sense the anger in her words, and was able to find one small sliver of courage. "Leave her alone!" he bellowed. The Gerudo regarded him with a wolf's eyes. "So, little boy, you do have some spirit after all," she chuckled, and then her expression darkened. "Very well, child. Give me the Kokiri Emerald, and I will leave your friend alone." "Promise?" Link asked, looking at Malon and furiously trying to think how he could avoid her getting harmed. "I promise." The Gerudo sounded amused. "Now, where is the stone? Show me!" Link gestured towards the door of his room. The Gerudo motioned for him to go in, and the look in her eyes promised murder if he tried anything suspicious. There was a shout from outside. "Ingo!" Link thought, feeling a surge of hope. Help was coming. Despite his plea, the woman didn't release Malon, and at the sound of shouting from outside, she only gripped Malon tighter. Link swallowed thickly and took a step towards his room. "Drop the sword." Link flinched at the Gerudo's command. Reluctantly, he obeyed, throwing his sword onto the floor. At another gesture from the Gerudo, Link walked into the room. The Gerudo followed him in, Malon still secured in her grip, and then scanned the room. "Where is it?" she demanded, and then her eyes narrowed. "Last chance, kid. Quit stalling, or your friend dies." Link's voice caught in his throat, unable to keep his voice steady. I have it." "It's here." Navi hovered beside him, having recovered from her collision with the wall. Link grabbed the stone from his pocket, hoping that Ingo, and whatever aid he brought, could prevent its capture. The Gerudo stretched out a hand, palm up, and Link tossed the stone to her. The thief caught it. "There," she soothed, stuffing the stone in a pouch secured to her waist. "That wasn't so hard now, was it?" With that, she threw Malon into Link, and they both tumbled to the floor. Untangling himself, Link looked up into the Gerudo's eyes, and seeing the chilling stare she gave him, he knew she had no intention of letting him live. "You promised!" he shouted accusingly, feeling a touch dumb for even saying the words. The Gerudo laughed, the sound mocking. "Stupid boy. It doesn't work like that." The woman rose her sword. "I kind of like you, so I'll make this quick." As she advanced, Malon made a strangled wail. Link jumped up and shoved her beside him. He rose his shield and the Gerudo's blade came swinging down, striking the wood with a thunk. Link stumbled, the force of the impact sending him backward. He fell into his backside, but quickly tried to recover as the Gerudo stepped forward. "Fine," she snapped. "Be difficult then, stupid boy." Two things happened at once. Link heard steps pounding on the stairs, and something tapped at the window. Not something. Someone. Another Gerudo. The Gerudo looked up, saw her companion, and started towards the window. Link managed to trip her over, more by accident than intent. He then did the unthinkable and leapt at her, thinking that if he could hold her just for a moment longer, help would arrive. The other Gerudo was trying to get in, but the locked window was hampering her efforts. Focusing on the woman with the stone, Link snatched at her clothing, wrapping his small arms around her neck as he tried to attack her, even going so far as to bite and scratch like an angry wolf cub. Malon, previously paralyzed by fear, seemed to notice Link's peril, for she jumped to her feet and started hitting the Gerudo. Her efforts were no more focused than Link's, and with a sharp slap to the head, the Gerudo sent her tumbling. She hit the floor hard. In that instant, Link's mind managed to grasp hold of some rationality. He thrust one hand into the Gerudo's pouch, snatching hold of the emerald. In the midst of the struggle, he dropped the stone, leaving it to tumble onto the floor. The Gerudo managed to throw him off, sending him crashing to the carpet. Something struck Link's head, and through the haze of pain, he realized it was the Gerudo's boot. The blow was hard enough that it sent stars blossoming across his vision. Dazed, it took Link a moment to notice that the second Gerudo had broken the glass. As she opened the window, something caught her attention, and she glanced off to one side. Her expression turned to surprise, then horror, as an enormous bird plowed into her. Link didn't see any more. Instead, he rolled to face his attacker, who wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the doorway. There, with one hand brandishing a pitchfork and the other a lantern, stood an incredibly shocked Ingo. He took in the sight of Link and Malon sprawled on the floor, and then the Gerudo standing halfway between the window and Link. All this happened within several heartbeats, and Ingo was the first to move. "Get out of here, you damned Gerudo whore!" he swore. Link was sure the Gerudo intended to do just that, but first, she made for the emerald. At the same time, Ingo raced forward, attacking the would-be thief. The Gerudo noticed, and her sword flashed toward Ingo. It was met by Ingo's pitchfork, but the force of the impact knocked the man backward. He stumbled, dropping the lantern. The glass shattered as it hit the ground, oil spilling out and catching alight just inches from Link and Malon. The heat rippled against Link's skin, snatching hold the Kokiri emerald, and crying out at the seething heat that burned his skin. He stuffed it into his satchel. The stone secure, he crawled backward, desperately trying to drag Malon with him. The Gerudo, meanwhile, was less fortunate. She swore in her native tongue as the fire followed the spilled oil, racing up her clothes and skin. Ingo had been splashed with liquid as well, but the Gerudo had sent him stumbling clear of any immediate danger. Link pulled Malon's arm, and she grabbed hold of him, letting him pull her away. Talon came bursting out from his room, horror written on his face as he took in the scene before him. Navi dashed past the burning doorframe and grabbed Link's sword. The Gerudo was screaming in agony as she became a living torch. Ingo took another swing at her, and when his pitchfork met her skull, the Gerudo went silent. Link made for the window, the fire licking hungrily at the walls, the smoke threatening to overwhelm him. "Malon!" he heard Talon cry out. "I have her!" Link yelled, helping Malon into the bed and looking at the window. The second thief had done him a favor by undoing the latch and pulling it open. A quick look offered no sign of the other Gerudo, but there was no time to consider what he'd do if she was still lurking nearby. That impact from Capera had to have at least stunned her. Either way, it was either jump or stay and burn. Link softened his tone, addressing Malon, who stared at the window in a terrified trance. "Malon, come on. You have to jump." She nodded, and without another word, she stumbled out the window and into the grass below. Link took one last look behind him to see Talon turn and run down the corridor, Ingo hot on his heels. The floorboards groaned as the fire chewed through them, weakening them enough that they started buckling and collapsing into the story below with a terrible roar. A foul odor of burning flesh assailed Link's nostrils, and he realized it was coming from the Gerudo. He clambered to the window, pushing back a shutter that was swinging freely in the light breeze. Just as Link went to jump, the hot yellow tongues of the rapidly spreading blaze reached the bed. He made the mistake of taking in a deep breath and was paralyzed in a spasm of coughs. The floor trembled beneath him, warning him that the floor was about to give way. He stumbled forward, his eyes watering, the smoke blinding. He reached the ledge and jumped. It was an awkward leap. He landed on all fours and then tumbled awkwardly into the damp earth. Not sparing a thought for his injuries, Link rolled to his feet and looked up in time to see Navi fly out the window. Then he doubled over, struck by another spasm of coughing. He was dimly aware of Malon hugging him, asking if he was okay. She released him as Talon reached them. He scooped Malon into his arms, and she just clung to him, trembling and sobbing. Ingo seemed unaware of this as he reached Talon, swearing loudly. "Ingo, go! Get the guards! Find Sierra!" Talon gasped between breaths. "There was a second one!" Link warned him, managing to find his breath. She was outside the window! I saw her! They fled, Ingo assured them both. I saw them flee! Link wasn't so convinced they were safe, but he didn't voice this as Ingo ushered them away from the farmhouse, and then went to do as Talon bade him. As he left, the two other farmhands arrived at a run. Talon quickly ordered them to move the horses out of the stable, in case the embers from the fire reached the building. Link offered to help, but Talon just shook his head. In the end, all Link could do was stare, watching the hungry flames consume Malon's home. Caper had said they were safe. How had Ganondorf figured out where the stone was? I should have left, Link thought. When Talon came over to see if he was alright, he felt so wrenched with guilt that he almost broke into sobs. I'm sorry, he managed, not quite able to keep a few tears from falling down his cheeks. It's not your fault, lad, he said, giving Link a gentle hug. It's not your fault. The reassurance did not make Link feel any better. Navi sat on his shoulder, looking sadly up at the burning house. Neither of them paid much attention as Caper returned, announcing that the second Gerudo had indeed fled. Nor did Link pay much notice as Ingo came running up the path with several Hylian guards, prompting Capera to take flight and leave. After taking in the sight of the burning building, the guards dispersed to scour the farm for any more intruders. Sierra came next. Link was startled when she came straight to him to make sure he was alright. She inspected his numerous bruises and his burnt hand, seemed to decide they were not serious, though they certainly hurt in Link's opinion, and then abruptly went to check Malon, who was still attached to her father. Sierra spoke to Talon, and he showed her a small object in her hand. They both stared, frowning. Meanwhile, the farmhands, Ingo included, doused the fire with buckets of water from a nearby waterhole. Although the fire did not reach the stables, their efforts to save the house were futile. As flames died down, a loud, angry yowl was heard as a rather chubby ginger cat extracted itself from the stables. Its fur bristled as it hissed and spat at the nearby hounds who were barking at the fire and anything that moved. Tingle! Malon cried. She was suddenly alert once more as the giant ginger cat yowled again and ran into her open arms, clinging to her for dear life. Link tried to extract the fat cat off her, but it only dug in harder, hissing and spitting all the while. Several villagers came to investigate the disturbance and offered Talon somewhere to stay. He politely refused their offers, and they soon left. Once the fire was out, Link, Talon, and Malon spent the rest of the night sleeping in the stable loft. The room was small, and there was limited bedding, so Link picked somewhere on the floor. He was far too tired to complain, but despite that, he wasn't able to sleep. He spent the rest of the night staring into the darkness of the loft. Sleep eluded him, and judging by the lack of snoring from Talon, he wasn't the only one awake.